So, Mike Landrum, welcome once again.
Thank you, Bill.
Your turn.
We're going to talk today about one of our principles states that we have a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. That's a principle we hold. And I'd like to begin with a little story about my daughter, Betsy. You may have heard this story before, but please forgive me. I'm still in love with Betsy. I still call her Betsy, even though she insists. Ever since she found out about the Queen of England, she said to us, call me Elizabeth. So Elizabeth was Betsy when she was tiny. And when she was not yet 2 years old, her favorite Walt Disney film on video was Cinderella. And we used it, as many young parents do, to keep the child occupied while we were busy cooking dinner. So that was the situation one evening when we heard the film at last coming to an end. And suddenly, little Betsy came running into the kitchen shouting, "The shoe fit! The shoe fit!" A state of great excitement. After watching that film countless times, she had finally figured out the meaning of Cinderella's glass slipper, and when it fit, what that meant, what that portended for her. It was a story of love. Well, some events are like that, aren't they? They mean something specific, and we have to figure out what exactly does that mean? Other events are not so simple. For instance, when Albert Einstein figured out the theory of relativity, was that a discovery or a decision? And what does it mean? People have pondered that ever since. It's over a century ago. So this brings us to the prominent existential question that religions ask of us. What is God's purpose for us? What should my life mean? Well, I was raised by my parents in a Protestant tradition. We moved around a lot. My dad worked in various professions in small towns in Colorado, Kansas, and Missouri. And with each move, they would choose a new church from either the Methodist or Presbyterian, depending, I suppose, on how they felt about the ministers or perhaps the quality of the chili suppers. Let me show you a sample. This was Southeast Missouri. Let me show you a sample of the decorations on the local highways. Come on. Oh, I have to. So this was a Baptist church, a Protestant church billboard advertising for people to come to church. A little sample of sorry about that. Little sample of the mentality in Southeast Missouri. Not exactly Unitarian Universalism. A rather strong point. I think I've always been ducking that sword. And these are hard times for meaning. I usually read the New York Times online, but today I wanted to have the physical paper. So I went to the grocery store and bought the New York Times. This is actually yesterday's issue. And the headline, can you read the headline okay? It says, in Indianapolis, third massacre in 3 months. An ugly sign of the times. Well, when I left home at 17 and began college, I left church going behind too. I was happy as a secularist. I only thought of God every now and then. Well, I remember one Vietnam night, especially loud during the Tet Offensive. God's name did come to my lips. However, other than that, I was more than happy to abandon all belief in the supreme being. So fast forward with me now to the age of 51, and I'm married for the fourth time, this time with a happy result. We're pregnant. We're about to have Betsy. So how can we provide for the spiritual life of this child? We thought about that. We had friends who were UUs. They took us to a couple of services, some down in the city, and finally we arrived at Rock Tavern. And I was happy to learn that these two religions, which had now combined and merged, had formed a new sort of principle-based religion. They were no longer creedal. There was no set of beliefs to swear allegiance to. There was no sword coming out of the skies and searching for sinners. Instead, they adopted a covenant of these principles that they aspire to live by. And I felt that was definitely a more human way to go. Especially since their first principle is the inherent worth and dignity of every person. Second, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. I know I don't have to read this to most of you, you're aware of it, but just in case there is a visitor here, someone in my position in 1993, when we first arrived here thinking about a religion for our coming daughter, Betsy. So the principles go on as an acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations. A free and responsible search for truth and meaning. The right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large. A principle that was close to being overturned in the country last year. The goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all, and respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. For that, we should thank the people who discovered the ozone layer had a hole in it. And one piece of good news we've seen recently in the news is that that hole in the ozone layer is beginning to heal. Why? Because we have stopped the use and production of Freon. That happened in 2020. And the good news is that new air conditioning systems made since 2010 no longer rely on Freon. Most newer AC units use a refrigerant called R410A or Puron, ever since April 7th, 2019. So perhaps our principles are beginning to have an effect outer. These principles are not ours alone. We cannot deny them to other people, but it's nice to see that they are being followed, being caught up with at least 75 or 80 million people in the last election. That was a difficult time for the Unitarian Universalist points of view. The last president, I don't even want to mention his name. So we're glad to be free of that unprincipled point of view that he brought to so many parts of our life. So there are a lot of undoings that are needed in this world, in particular, the undoing of the way we are destroying the planet and for instance, you know that we're getting back to, and I have great hopes for Joe Biden and his many, in his first 100 days, he has done more to help the planet and to make it work and to keep it going, to cut the dangers to our climate, which need to be dealt with, because just look at all of the hurricanes. I've been muttering to myself all this time. Is that so? Have you heard anything? Good. I loved the, yes, hello? So I'm interested in finding out what meanings you have garnered for yourselves as a result of joining this congregation. Has this been a meaningful experience to you? And how and why have you changed, if you've changed? Vern, have you changed at all in the many years that you've been a Unitarian? What's the difference now compared to the Vern that would have been before? Unmute yourself, Vern, if you wouldn't. All right, I've put you on the spot. I apologize. Would anyone like to offer a suggestion on meaning?
I can answer that a bit. I found the unmute finally. I think through the years, I've really attached myself to our history as I learned it bit by bit. And in the beginning, I knew nothing of it. I only had the feeling of coming home that I had when I attended the first service was because of the here and now, the present feeling of being at home in a Unitarian service. But through the years when I learned the history, I knew the strand of life that I was attached to. It really deepened it and gave it much more meaning. That we are part of a flowing stream that goes way, way back, and goes. Well, of course, we'll go into the future where we do not know. We will not know what will be. So I just love being part of that river of liberal thought, liberal philosophical, spiritual thought. Very happy I found it. I remember having the feeling when I was 20 and found it, of, oh, I thought it was just me. I thought I was going to be myself as an individual, but oh my goodness, I'm part of a big group without even knowing it. That there are people out there like me, and that was an awareness that I didn't have until the man who brought me to the first service at the church in Syracuse, the Unitarian Church in Syracuse. That feeling of homecoming.
Yes, thank you, Vern. Yes, I felt that too. A feeling of fellow feeling that does stretch back in time. You know, one of the advantages of the time we live in is that we can explore our history, our individual history. I joined an outfit called Ancestry, perhaps Ancestry.com. Some of you have investigated that and found out I come from roots in Scotland and in England, and in fact, one of my forebears came across with the Norman conquest, even, and arrived here in time to fight in the Revolution and fight in the Civil War too. Unfortunately, I found some Confederates. I found slave owners. So we come from a huge spectrum of humanity. And I think that's essential that we understand and embrace that. Anyone else want to discuss meaning? Linda.
Mike, when you speak of the broad spectrum, like many of my fellow Unitarians, I grew up in a Lutheran or some other religious, like you, Mike, or whatever. As a young child and a teenager, I was taught that Jesus was sitting right there on my shoulder watching. And if I broke the rules, man, there would be hell to pay, literally.
Yes.
And it took, well, I was in my mid 40s when I had taken my children to the Presbyterian Church because I wanted them to have a religious grounding. And I found that I could no longer sing the words in the hymnal. I could no longer say the creed, and I was struggling. And quite by what I would say divine intervention, I discovered that there was a Unitarian congregation less than 5 miles from my home. And I came here, and through the quality of services, we had a minister for part of the time that I've been here, but we also had many lay-led services when members of the congregation would bring a story like Vern's or a story like yours, or some sort of philosophical or marvelous, really. There were wonderful lay-led services. And we also had Quaker services. And it was during a Quaker service where we simply sat in a quiet circle and people spoke if they felt so moved. And during one of those services, something shifted for me. And I was able to move forward in my life knowing that I didn't have to fear hell, that everyone has inherent worth and dignity, and that can't be taken away from them. And to me, that was the biggest life shift of my 80 years. So thank you, and thank you, this congregation. It made a huge, huge difference in how I'm able to be in my world.
Thank you for that share. I feel just as you do. Hollis, I saw your hand up a minute ago.
Yes. When I was young, I wanted to be a know-it-all. I wanted to impress friends and family with my vast knowledge. I read voraciously, and I was pretty smart. I don't think I ever achieved being a know-it-all, but we've always met people who are know-it-alls. And even if they don't know it, they may lie or retreat or some stupid thing like that. So anyway, I remember when I joined this UU group in 1997, I was getting better, but I still wanted to impress people with my vast knowledge. I remember time spending with the minister before Reverend Chris, Jim Bridges. He was in a small group and he wanted to talk to us about some philosophical things. And he was coming up to defining the word, I think it was semiotics, which is a philosophical term. And before he could open his mouth, I said, I know that, because I was so desperate to impress everyone. And it wasn't too long before being in that group that I changed. I began to get much wiser, and I read constantly, but instead of I know it all, it became I really don't know that much anymore. And I found myself saying more and more when other people were talking, I would listen more and I would say, oh, I didn't know that. And I say that now constantly. People talk to me, they tell me things. I don't know if they're precisely true, but I will listen and say, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. And with that kind of questioning and the humility of knowledge is essential to Unitarian Universalism. And I'll conclude my little speech with a comment I believe was said by Václav Havel. He said, run towards those who are seeking the truth. Run away from those who say they have found it.
Excellent. Very good. Very good. Yes. And one of the things that I have particularly enjoyed in this congregation is the opportunity for members to stand up and deliver, as I have attempted to do today. And I apologize for my wretchedness here, but Zoom sometimes frustrates me and flusters me. I think I once made my living doing television commercials, and somehow I expect everything to turn out like a TV commercial now. I promise you they don't. So humility should be a principle, I think. Seek opportunities for humility. And that's a little like you're talking about, Hollis. Yes, yes. Don't pretend to know it all. You can't pour new wine in a full glass. Anyone else care to comment? Yes, Bill.
Well, I just want to say, I think it's nice that we could all sit under one roof and feel compassion for others and enjoy and explore different forms of spirituality under one roof without any creed or belief, and not being persecuted for it.
Yes, yes, yes. We can come here at one of the first services I attended at UUCRT at Rock Tavern was called Creating Your Own Theology. And I feel that's what I've been doing for 27 years now. And part of my theology is understanding those who do not believe as I do. I mean, I started out with those Baptists in Southeast Missouri who were, well, my mother had a saying. She said, you know, some of the people around here are so narrow-minded they could look through a keyhole with both eyes. And I'm afraid that was true. I'm much happier now having friends like you, broad-minded enough to accept one another and to forgive one another and to forgive yourselves, even if you mess up on a Sunday service. So
You didn't mess up.
oh well, it was part of the humility lesson that I was trying to teach, and I learned it well. We have another piece of music, and what's on the?
It's called Golden Brown by Dave Brubeck.
Oh, good, little piece of jazz.
But Mike, if you don't mind me just saying something before the music starts. I don't know how I remember such things, but I remember a long time ago when we were in the Episcopal Church on 94 temporarily, and one of the members' daughters was very musical, and she did a solo piece on a
Yes,
saxophone.
yes.
And I remember you going up to her and saying, oh, now we're grooming the next Jerry Mulligan.
Yeah.
And that's what we're going to hear with Dave, with the teamwork.
Dave Brubeck. Well,
Dave
you'll hear,
and Jerry
you'll
Mulligan.
hear Paul Desmond. He plays just a regular alto sax, but it's magnificent. Dave Brubeck, one of my favorites. Thanks, Elizabeth.